Okay, here we are in, what is this, Module 8, and this is Part 2. And I think it's going to be Part 2 of 2. I think we'll dispense with it that time. Maybe it's Part 2 of 3. I don't know. We'll find out. So, discourse analysis of emotion then. This discursive psychology, fancy term, analyzing emotion through discourse analysis. This is the deconstruction of psychology talk. So when someone's expressing something, when someone's telling a story, when we're writing a piece of work, or some kind of testimony, we can deconstruct it, and that's what that means. We can start taking it apart and looking at individual words, individual clauses, and searching for the meaning that's contained therein. This assumes that the language or word choice has meaning that can facilitate understanding of the world. And the words that we use, when you think about it, when we're talking freely, we're not really consciously generating the conversation. It's coming from a different area of the brain as we produce that narrative. Some of us believe that words in fact have meaning, right? And this is just not random selection, that these words are chosen for a purpose. So as we deconstruct the conversation, for those of us who kind of adopt this kind of point of view, as we deconstruct, we can see that, wow, why that word and not another word, right? And that has meaning, or at least we believe it may have meaning. And this really considers the concepts of a phenomenal field that Carl Rogers would have shared with us, the psychological reality. Notice there's a huge kind of field theory, Lewinian kind of flavor to this as well, that these words are chosen for a reason, but the choices are made non-conscious, and that means they're outside necessarily of conscious control. Freud also talked about Freudian slips, the little unconscious productions in language that generate the true hidden meaning, or as a road to the unconscious. So emotion talk in narrative is rich and various. It depends on the people and the situation. Emotion in everyday talk can account for the source of observed behaviors. That is, wow, they use that word, you know, which has a negative tone to it, but notice behaviorally they seem to be closed off or moving away from that person as well, right? So it has the potential to offer excuse for behavior. I was so mad that I couldn't help but, right? And then we're talking in terms of why this behavior occurred and linking it back to an emotion. Again, this can be deconstructed. So now for the next couple, I think the next two slides, just hang out, but don't generate memories of this. It's getting a little far afield, but I want to give you kind of some examples. Edwards looks at this kind of discursive analysis, and then he can lump it into categories, and each category represents a continuum. So I can look at a piece of work and say, this language that's being used here, does this represent emotion or thinking? Feeling or thinking, right? Is this part of the narrative, is it looking at emotions as describing them as rational or irrational, right? Is it looking at emotion as cognitively grounded, you know, or cognitively consequential? Is it event-driven versus person-driven, dispositional-driven? Is it describing long-standing dispositions or temporary states? And you can see that this is for another class down the road, right? Further on, emotion talk is a rhetorical device. Is the emotion behavior controllable, or is it being explained as a passive reaction? Does it appear to be spontaneous, that is just occurring, or does it seem to be externally caused? Natural versus moral, and so it goes on. The last one kind of interesting, honest versus faked. So for especially like English majors who want to do some heavy-duty rhetorical analysis, you're going to be familiar with Edwards, and you're going to look at these classification schemes or continuums to understand this. This is how deep it can go. These two slides, though, are off limits for the test. I'm not going to go there. But now here's an example, right? And application of Edwards' rhetorical analysis. Let's look at a written statement about a traumatic automobile accident, right? and it was almost like my emotions were charged, and that's how I feel. I was almost buzzing with my emotions, but somewhere in the back of my mind, the sensible part of me, the logical part of me, took over to say, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to stop these people going into the road. So bottom line, there's an effort to take a situation, right, in which a lot of conflicting elements exist, the experience, the observations, and express it into a cohesive, interpretable, and meaningful manner. And that's about all we need to say about that. The experience, though, is essentially, as you can see, crafted into a narrative, and that's probably the most significant point of all of this. How is the narrative deconstructed then? And Edwards offers us some continuums on which to measure it. And like I said, those 3 slides, keep them off limits, don't worry about it. Now, this is the part 2. I got to tell you how much I love this. So, and if you haven't seen it, you're in for a treat. And of course, there'll be an accompanied video posted, because I don't know how these are going to translate to your screen, etc. But again, what's going on here? This is a very finely crafted demonstration, probably kind of an unusual setting or scenario, but check it out. And this is, of course, JeanClaude Van Damme. I love JeanClaude Van Damme, movie actor, martial artist. If you're familiar with the movie Bloodsport, then you know this guy, among others. But let's go ahead and watch this. And if you wish, this is the optional part I was discussing. If you want to add a discussion of this onto your home activity, you may do so. And if you don't, then don't bother with this one. But I want you to do the other one. Capiche? Okay. So, but this is cool, and maybe you can identify the artist who produced the music for this as well. But here we go. And this just gets me all jacked. I really enjoy this.
I've had my ups and downs, my fair share of bumpy roads and heavy winds. That's what made me what I am today. Now I stand here before you. What you see is a body crafted to perfection, a pair of legs engineered to defy the laws of physics, and a mindset to master the most epic of splits.
Who can say where the road goes, where the day flows? Only time. And who can say if your love grows as your heart chose? Only time.
Okay then. JeanClaude Van Damme is known for his leg strength, quads like nobody's business, and that was genuine. That is, he is able to do those splits, and he's done them a million times in the movies. To be doing it with 2 moving trucks, and notice this is not a photo imagery. That was genuine, right? So, and I guess the caveat goes, don't try that at home or out on the highway either. The much simpler, much more basic demonstration than the previous demonstration for AIG reverse mortgages and Tom Selleck. This is a very simplified, but notice it is an amazingly well-crafted piece of video and audio imagery in this regard. And again, I'll have a link available to this clip outside of this presentation format, stored with the lecture. Oops. Yeah, I'd like to see it again, but we need to move on. So, combining methods, all the preceding techniques offer some utility in bringing meaning to emotional experience. And separating meaning from emotion might be difficult. I might say one of the core components or purposes of emotion is to put us in touch with meaning and our experience or our understanding of the meaning. These methods can be employed by various disciplines in multiple contexts, and all are devices that affect emotional memory that is part of the larger memorial narrative, memorial sense making. So, I'm gaining my composure. This part is pretty emotionally laden, and so I got to get control of myself here for a minute. This is Dr. Chubb, and I had Dr. Chubb for 2 classes at University of California, Irvine when I was an undergraduate there. I had human cognition and human memory with Dr. Chubb. Dr. Chubb I found to be an amazing professor and intensely intellectual and very demanding as far as course content and what we did, but at the same time amazingly personally informal. One of the first instructors I had who came in Levi's and a t-shirt to teach. I love Dr. Chubb and his instructional style, but and also in the way he made us think. I remember in human intelligence and human cognition, when I took that class, the first book we read was by Plato, but it was Theaetetus. So Dr. Chubb, I assume, I never asked him directly, was a Vietnam veteran, because he was a couple years older than me, and that's all you needed to be, was a Vietnam vet. But towards the end of our memory class, he asked this question. He asked us if objects had memory. And we're thinking about human memory, we'd studied animal memory, we'd studied all these different, forms of memory, but then he hits us with this idea that is kind of an unanswerable. And then, but, he had to create an example, so the example he brought up was the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And ever since he asked this question, I've been kind of thinking, wow, do objects have memory? And so let's take a little tour. Maybe you're not familiar with the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, but here it is. And what it is, it's a wall that was built to commemorate Vietnam veterans, and it was intentionally commemorating the 58,000 plus Americans that died in Vietnam as a result of the Vietnam War, and each of their names is engraved in this wall of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Intentionally, the names are not in order. So it really causes people to have to be with the memorial and search. Here are just a bunch of photographs I found. So you can see here the statues that exist outside the memorial and the folks down at the memorial. Many people leave objects that have meaning to them. They're crafting a narrative, they're completing a narrative, they're experiencing the emotions and creating a narrative. They're trying to add meaning to the Vietnam experience. And let's consider that the Vietnam experience is a tough one, because a lot of people went to fight and a lot of people lost their lives. Some people wanted to go. Most people didn't want to go. This is when there was a draft, so many people were drafted and told you will go to Vietnam, right? And this is something they had to do. And if they weren't rich, they couldn't buy themselves deferments. Forgive that little aside. But, it's like the poor and the middle class, they go because they're told to go. The rich, if they want to buy their way out by going to college, or they want to develop bone spurs or whatever the hell it is. But you can see that people are trying to make sense, so they're leaving precious items that are precious to them, to try and gain closure on a war that was fought for 8 years, killed 58,000 American soldiers, killed 2 million Vietnamese people, right? This is a huge war, killed people in Cambodia, and they need to make sense, because what happened? Well, come 1973 to 75, Nixon engineered our exit from Vietnam, a good thing, but basically we left, having accomplished nothing, right? So, what do we know? Well, people visit the wall. Here's the names. Probably her grandparents there. Okay. What else do we know? People often take pieces of paper and then they rub the pencil on it, because these are engraved, so that they can retain the name, that they can remember the name, that they can hold on to the name. And you can see people do this. Still people being sought out and searched for. Okay. So, the wall allows people to assist with their emotional disclosure, right? Does it guarantee positive outcomes? Not necessarily, not as expected. Smith did a meta-analysis, reported general improvements in health, but a 2004 meta-analysis demonstrated improvement in physical but not mental health. 2005 meta-analysis suggests clear benefit associated with emotional disclosure. Lots of potential for future study. More complex, detailed analyses need to be done, greater consistency under the methodology, and more consistent rapport level with the clients in assisting. Now, let's talk about Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, existential philosopher, who really kind of contributed tremendously to existential psychology as well, the general perspective. Sartre describes bad faith narratives as knowledge that's socially acceptable can distort narratives of remembered emotional experience. So if a narrative is crafted in bad faith, it's not genuine, right? Is one way to look at that. To the extent that extensive emotion work is conducted, narratives can achieve a dramatic distance from reality, what actually occurred. And deception can be doubly deceptive in that deception can be used to deceive others, but also to deceive oneself, right? And a quote from Sartre here, it's man's condemned to be free because once thrown into the world, he's responsible for everything he does. It's up to you to give life a meaning. Right? And so these incongruent rationalizations can grow out of these bad faith narratives. Begin with Freud's defense mechanism, one of his 8, right? And what we see here then is rationalization as one of those 8. In the earlier passage we discussed, the subject seems ready to denigrate the emotional experience, that is, to essentially not to own the experience. Clearly this could be the result of employing the defense mechanism to demonstrate the ego's conformance to superego requirements, and remember, this could be done subconsciously as well. Or more social psychologically, to reinterpret the experience in the defense of the perceived self as strong and in control, crafting a narrative until one experiences control as a result of it. And let's think in terms of like a police officer. They suppress emotional experience as a requirement of their occupation. They're told you can't take this stuff home or you won't survive. You'll burn yourself out. This may represent less defense mechanism, moving more toward upholding a cultural conception. Which is it? And it could be both, right? Maybe neither. And the acquisition of this system of rationalization is likely to result of years of experience in a culture telling us what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, through the adoption of norms, as well as more immediate and short-term training, initiation into an occupation, right? And we know that not only are memories constructed, they can represent tremendous revisionist forces, often culturally inspired or culturally constrained. So that's about it for us in this idea, really kind of tying, hopefully, the idea of motion, emotional expression, narrative, sense meaning, and language all together in one package. And talking about memories, two that have passed, Pigpen and his dog Digby. So I hope you guys are doing well at home, and let's call it good.